Hey guys, I'm really excited about today's video. So I want to talk to you about how I was able to overcome erectile dysfunction and basically be able to have sex whenever I want. And I have zero anxiety about getting hard, or I really don't think about sex in that way at all. And one of the reasons that I was able to solve it is because I had a realization that I was staring at the problem from an angle that would never let me solve it. And there's a very good chance that if you're struggling with erections, you're doing this too. So if you watch one of my videos all the way through, this is definitely the one to watch. So if you don't know me, my name is Cam Joyner. I had erectile dysfunction for 7 years. It was a really painful experience that tore my life apart, but it's also, quite honestly, one of the best things that ever happened to me because the process of healing it taught me so much about myself and about ways that I was making myself miserable and about how I approached life, that I'm a much happier person now, and not just because I can have sex. So I want to walk you through how I was approaching this, how I was thinking about it, about trying to solve it, and then I'll show you what actually shifted my mindset to thinking about it in a different way, and I'll show you how that actually helped eventually solve the problem. So my background is that I started out as an IT guy, so my way of thinking was very logical, and I approached it mostly from a perspective of trying to solve a computer problem. So when I first started losing erections, let's be honest, I avoided admitting to myself that I had a problem. I just, it was the booze, or I came up with excuses, but eventually it was painful enough that I had a come to Jesus moment with myself. And I admitted to myself, yes, I have a problem with this. And so I went into problem solving mode. And so I started thinking, okay, what do I know about erections? And the very first thing that I came to is like, okay, I probably need testosterone. Like testosterone is probably the main thing that's going on. And so I went to GNC and bought a lot of supplements after doing research about, precursors to testosterone and things like that. And so I started taking supplements and I saw absolutely no benefits at all. And so eventually, after a while of doing this, I went and got tested, and it turned out my testosterone levels were in the 700s. So if you don't know anything about testosterone, that's on the higher side. So obviously that wasn't the problem. So I started learning more about how our body, like how erections actually happen. And so one of the main things that has to happen for an erection to start is that your body sends nitric oxide down to the smooth muscle tissue in your penis that basically tells it to relax. And as your smooth muscle tissue in your penis relaxes, it opens up these cavernous areas inside the penis which fill with blood, which then as it fills with blood, it gets bigger and bigger, and that getting bigger actually pinches off the dorsal vein. So the next place that I went was nitric oxide. Okay. So I started taking supplements to optimize for nitric oxide. I started looking at things that interfere with this. And once again, dead end. And so I also started to notice that my genitals were actually shrinking when they were flaccid. So my penis was actually smaller than it was normally, which really freaked me out. And so I went on the internet and self-diagnosed myself with something called venous leak, which I then went to a urologist and more or less convinced the urologist that I had this problem, and he agreed that probably was it because it was clear that there was something going on with blood flow and I didn't have a heart issue. So I don't know exactly what happened. I never ended up getting a Doppler ultrasound, but the urologist was pretty confident that I had a venous leak. So I spent the next 2 years of my life worrying about venous leak. So if you're worrying about venous leak, I can tell you as somebody who went through this and wasted 2 years of my life, it's very unlikely that you have a venous leak. And I have a course down below that's free that will walk you through why you probably don't have that. So I got stuck on this for 2 years, and I was at a point where I was really, really down, and I was frustrated, and I was pretty hopeless. And so my friend Brian reached out, and he was asking me like, hey, do you want to go out for lunch? And I was like, sure. And when I met up with Brian, he was in an amazing mood. And sometimes Brian's in a good mood, sometimes he's not, but he was in an unusually good mood. And so I was like, what's going on? And so for context, Brian is an acupuncturist. And he was really excited because he'd had this client come to him that was having really bad shoulder pain up in their left shoulder, around their shoulder blade area. And like just this whole area was really painful. And he was really excited to tell me about how he treated them. And I was like, okay, I know a little bit about Chinese medicine, but I don't know all the acupuncture points and things like that. And he was so excited to tell me about it. Basically, what happened is that the person had one foot that was flat. The arch was flat instead of arched. And I was like, how the hell can that fix somebody's shoulder pain? Especially because it was their right foot that he fixed. And he said, well, you have to understand, Chinese medicine doesn't look at things in pieces. We don't look at, okay, well, why is the shoulder hurting? We look at what's happening with the body. And so what was happening with this particular person is that because their right foot was flat, so their left foot wasn't, which basically meant that their right hip was slightly lower than their left hip, which also meant that their right shoulder was slightly lower than their left shoulder, which meant that the muscles on the left side, they had to hold on in order to, because the angle of the tilt of their body. And so what he did was he helped get the arch to pop back up by releasing muscles, because basically there were tight muscles down here that were preventing the arch from behaving naturally. So over the course of a few weeks, he was able to help them get the arch working, which evened out the hips, which evened out the shoulders, and allowed the muscles in the shoulder to relax. And so this actually fixed the person's tendinitis. They had tendinitis in their left hand and pain in their shoulder. And so just allowing those things to even out made their pain go away. And so I was like, how can I apply this type of thinking to erections? And so, of course, the first thing that I did was talk to Brian about my problem, and he was not able to improve it with acupuncture. But what he did for me was that he allowed me to start looking at the problem in a completely different way. Instead of looking at it as what happens right before an erection, what happens right after an erection, I started to think about it holistically. And so what I was doing before was something called linear thinking. So A causes B causes C. And linear thinking is a very effective way of logically solving a problem as long as the problem is simple. So I'll give you an example. If you turn on a light switch and the light doesn't go on, using linear thinking is really good. So you think, okay, the light switch sends electricity to the bulb, and if the light's not turning on, maybe the electricity's not getting there. So you go check the breaker, and either the breaker's off and you flip it on and the light should work, or the breaker's on, which means that you probably need to change the light bulb. And so if you go and change the light bulb, then likely it'll work. So it's a very simple problem, which is why linear A causes B causes C thinking is very effective. But erections are incredibly complex. And it turns out that if you try to apply this A causes B causes C thinking to something that's very complex, you pretty much have to get extremely lucky in order to solve the problem this way. And so there is a much better way of thinking about something that's complex, and it's called systems thinking. At the time, I didn't know about systems thinking, but what happened with Brian got me start thinking about the problem in a completely different way. So if you don't know what a system is, it's a very simple thing. A system is basically composed of four things. So the first one is an input, the second one is a process, the third one is an output, and the fourth one is the environment that the system itself exists in. So I'll give you an example of this. A thermostat is an example of a system that you already understand. You put in a desired temperature, that's the input. Then that temperature input will actually cause a burner, like a heater or an air conditioner, to adjust the temperature, and then the output is the temperature that you wanted. What's really interesting about systems is that an output can actually influence an input. And this is really, really important when it comes to fixing erection issues. So I'll give you an example of what that means in the temperature setting, and then we'll talk about what it means for erections. So let's say that you put in the temperature of 75 degrees. You're really cold and you're like, I just want to crank that thing up. And then that's the input. It goes into the process, which turns on the heater. The heater makes an output of 75 degrees. And for all of you people outside of America, 75, I'm going to guess it's probably like 26 Celsius, somewhere around there. But basically, that output of 75 degrees, you might be like, it's hot in here. And so what that might actually make you do, the output, will make you change your behavior on the input. 75 is too hot. I'm going to set it down to 71. So this is the same thing that happens with erections. The most common thing that is actually interfering with your erections is the output of your erection system. And so what I mean by that is if we look at erections from the perspective of a system, There's a lot of other systems that lead up to this one, but the one that I want to talk about the most is the nervous system. So if you have an input of arousal, and the process is sending the chemicals down to the penis in order to relax it, and the output is an erection, what ends up happening is if you're in a situation where you lose an erection, and it doesn't really matter why. It could be alcohol, it could be being too tired, it could be still being at work, it could be not that attracted to the person, it could be not feeling safe. Whatever the reason, when you get an output of not an erection when you're expecting one, that actually affects the nervous system. That now triggers fight or flight because you don't like the experience that happens afterwards. You get nervous or embarrassed or whatever, and that affects the input. So what that means is the last time that you had sex, what happened is actually a really important piece of what happens the next time you have sex. So things like what's happening with your career, that can actually affect your erection quality. Things like what's happening in your relationship. Do you like the person? Does your relationship feel secure? That can actually affect your erection quality. Things like how do I feel about my physical body can affect your erection quality. So you have to start looking at your life as a whole. A lot of problems are caused outside the bedroom. And then the ultimate piece of it is the pressure, the anxiety, the frustration, any of those things that you're bringing into the bedroom with the input of arousal, those can all affect your erection quality. So in some ways, it's more complex to fix this than you think, but the good news is you're no longer stuck thinking about it from a tunneled point of view that'll never give you the answer that you need. So if you're tired of losing your erections and you're tired of not knowing what to do to fix it, I would strongly suggest joining my school community. So inside, I meet with you guys every week and I answer questions about it. There's also step-by-step courses and ways that you can get help from other guys that are going through the same thing. So if you would like help like that, there's a link down below in the description and come join us. We would love to help you get past this.